a werewolf shifter romance audiobook. Written by Catherine Stewart. Prologue. 15 years earlier. The air near the Direfang border always felt thin, charged with a wildness that frayed the nerves of outsiders. Tonight, it thrummed with something more. Stealth and deceit. 3 shadows detached themselves from the deeper gloom beneath the ancient pines, moving with the unnatural quiet of wolves forcing themselves against their predatory instincts. Their scent was deliberately masked, cloaked in mud and neutralizing herbs, but beneath it clung the faint, sharp tang of Alistair, alien and unwelcome this deep into the buffer zone. Their leader, Kalen, scanned the moon-dappled clearing ahead, his hand resting on the hilt of the blade hidden beneath his cloak. His orders, delivered in the Alistair Alpha's cold, precise tones, echoed in his mind. Secure the Crestwood female child. The one with the problematic lineage. Her mother is facilitating a wander near the border. Be swift. Be silent. Leave no trace linking back to us. This alliance depends on controlling that dormant power before it ever has a chance to wake. A rustle in the undergrowth nearby. Kalen tensed, signaling his companions. A moment later, a nervous-looking Crestwood Omega emerged, wringing his hands. She's by the old creek, the Omega whispered, avoiding Kalen's eyes. Playing with carved stones. As arranged. He flinched as Kalen tossed a small pouch of silver at his feet. The Omega snatched it and vanished back into the shadows, a necessary pawn smelling faintly of familial betrayal. Kalen motioned his team forward. They moved like wraiths towards the sound of childish humming and the gentle splash of water. There she was. Small, dark-haired, engrossed in arranging smooth gray stones on a mossy bank. Oblivious. Innocent. A threat simply by virtue of her blood, the latent spark of wild Direfang magic inherited through a matrilineal line the Crestwoods had tried and failed to completely breed out. A power the Alistairs feared and coveted in equal measure. The abduction was brutally swift. One moment, the child, Maya, was humming, holding a small, crudely carved wooden wolf pup. The next, a hand clamped over her mouth, strong arms lifted her, and the world became a terrifying blur of rough fabric, unfamiliar scents, and struggling panic. A small gasp escaped before the hand tightened, silencing her cry. The little wooden wolf tumbled from her grasp, landing unnoticed among the moss and stones. She kicked and squirmed, terror giving way to a nascent flicker of something else, a spark of fight, of wildness. But she was small, unprepared. They bound her hands, muffled her face more securely, and melted back into the forest, heading away from Direfang lands towards the safety of the Alistair territory where her conditioning could begin, where the wild spark could be systematically extinguished. Miles away, patrolling the edge of his pack's territory even as a young, powerful wolf just settling into his pre-alpha strength, Jax caught it. A faint scent on the wind, carried from the buffer zone. Lilies and sunshine, the unique, unmistakable scent that had inexplicably imprinted on his senses weeks ago, the scent he instinctively knew belonged only to her, his fated one, though they had never formally met. But beneath it, sharp and wrong, was the scent of fear and fainter, almost gone. Alistair. Alarm, cold and sharp, pierced through him. He shifted, the change fluid, instantaneous, born of urgent terror. For paws pounded the earth, covering the distance with desperate speed, following the fading, precious scent trail mixed with the acrid taint of invaders. He arrived at the creek only moments too late. The clearing felt violated, the air thick with lingering fear scent, and the triumphant musk of Alistair wolves now long gone. Her primary scent was fading rapidly, dragged away eastward. Jax let out a desperate howl, a sound of pure, primal agony that tore through the twilight forest, answered only by the mocking silence. His frantic gaze scanned the ground, searching for any sign, any clue. Then he saw it, nestled in the moss near the disturbed creek bank. A small, crudely carved wooden wolf pup, still radiating the faint, fading warmth of her touch, still carrying the ghost of her unique scent. He nudged it with his muzzle, a low whine tearing from his throat. He shifted back, his human form trembling with the rage and grief too vast for his young shoulders. He picked up the small token, clutching it in his hand as if it were the last anchor in a world suddenly ripped apart. They had taken her. His mate. Stolen. The Alistairs, their supposed allies, reeking of treachery. Standing alone in the violated clearing, clutching the small wooden wolf, Jack Direfang, the boy who would become the Alpha Beast, made a vow. He would find her. He would hunt down those who took her, those who betrayed him, betrayed them. He would wait. He would build his strength. He would watch. And one day, he would tear down the world they had built on lies and reclaim what was rightfully, fatefully, his. The small wooden wolf became a constant, hidden weight against his heart. And the wound left by her absence festered, fueling a rage, a possessiveness, and a deep, aching loneliness that would shape him into the beast feared and whispered about across the territories, waiting for the day her scent would finally call him home. The scent of lilies and impending doom choked the air. Or perhaps that was just the whalebone corset digging into my ribs, forcing my breaths into shallow, ladle-like gasps. Lilies. The Alistair pack flower. They were everywhere, woven into my hair, spilling from crystal vases, embroidered onto the impossible weight of silk covering my body. Each petal felt like a tiny, suffocating hand pressed over my mouth. Stop it, Maya. Breathe. This is perfection. I smoothed a hand down the ridiculously expensive lace overlaying the satin skirt, the movement stiff, unnatural. My reflection stared back from the gilt-edged mirror dominating the bridal suite, a stranger in white. Pale skin, dark hair swept up meticulously, eyes wide with, what? Anticipation? Terror? Duty? Yes, duty. That was the acceptable answer. This union, this alliance, secured peace, bolstered our pack's standing, mended old wounds with the powerful Alistairs. Liam Alistair, my intended, was handsome, respected, the heir to it all. He was suitable. Everything was suitable. Polished. Perfect. A hollow ache echoed beneath my ribs, a counterpoint to the corset's bite. Love, real love, the kind whispered about in foolish stories, the kind that felt like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. That was a luxury. Stability, security, respect, those were the currencies that mattered in the intricate dance of pack politics. My parents had reminded me of that, gently but firmly, my entire life. This marriage was the culmination of their ambitions, the bedrock of our future. Our future. Not necessarily mine. Beautiful, child. Absolutely radiant. Aunt Alara swept into the room, her own scent, sharp, controlling lavender, cutting through the lilies. Her eyes, chips of cool gray flint, scanned me head to toe, missing nothing. The Alistairs will be impressed. Impressed. Not delighted, not captivated. Impressed. As if I were a prize mare being presented at auction. I forced a smile that felt like cracking porcelain. Thank you, Aunt Alara. Just remember to hold your head high. Shoulders back. Liam's mother has exacting standards. She reached out, adjusting a curl by my ear with possessive fingers. And don't forget the protocols during the binding vows. Clarity, precision. No, emotional flourishes. This seals the treaty as much as your union. My stomach tightened. Emotional flourishes? Did she think I was going to burst into song? Or tears? The pressure was immense, a physical weight pressing down, heavier than the gown, heavier than the Alistair diamonds cold against my throat. This alliance secures everything, I repeated silently, a mantra against the rising tide of something else. Something unsettled. This alliance secures peace position. Love is a luxury. The words felt like ash in my mouth. A flicker, sudden and unwelcome, behind my eyes. Molten gold, intense, feral. A flash of dark trees rushing past, the sting of pine needles against my cheek, a sharp, forgotten pain blossoming on my shoulder, a child's cry swallowed by the wind. I shivered, the movement jarring against the corset's rigidity. Nerves, dear. Aunt Alara's voice sharpened slightly. Perfectly normal. Drink some water. But not too much, you wouldn't want to disturb the line of the gown. Just a little cold, I murmured, rubbing my arms. The memory, or whatever it was, vanished as quickly as it came. A childhood tumble near the Direfang border, Mother had said dismissively when I'd asked about the faint scar years ago. Too close to their savage territory. Just a fall, nothing more. Still, the echo of those golden eyes lingered, unsettling, like the phantom scent of ozone before a lightning strike. The Direfangs. Reclusive. Primal. Led by some Alpha Beast, whispered about in frightened tones, a cautionary tale parents told unruly pups. Best forgotten. This life, this gilded cage was safe. Predictable. A knock sounded. Liam's younger sister, Chloe, peeked in, her expression carefully neutral. They're ready for you, Maya. Aunt Alara gave me one last critical appraisal, nodded sharply, and swept out, leaving Chloe and me in the sudden quiet. Chloe offered a small, hesitant smile. You look lovely. There was something in her eyes, though. Pity? Understanding? Or was I projecting my own anxieties onto everyone around me? Thank you, Chloe. I took a deep breath, the corset fighting me. Duty. Stability. Peace. I clung to the words as I followed Chloe out of the suite, the train of my dress whispering secrets against the polished floorboards. The corridor leading to the great hall was lined with stern-faced Alistair guards, their silver and blue uniforms crisp, their expressions unreadable. Each step felt weighted, pulling me towards a future meticulously planned by others. The air felt thick, charged, humming with an energy that prickled my skin. Nerves, I told myself again. Just the magnitude of the day. But it felt different. Wilder. Like the controlled facade of the estate couldn't quite contain something ancient and restless stirring beneath the surface. Then, the hall itself. Vast, opulent, breathtaking. Sunlight streamed through arched windows, illuminating the hundreds of assembled guests, powerful alphas, Lunar matriarchs, pack elders from across the territories. The combined weight of their stares was a physical force. Alliances hung in the air, thick as incense. Every gaze assessed, calculated. My family beamed from the front pew, their faces masks of triumphant pride. This was their victory. I was the beautiful, compliant symbol of it. The music swelled, the traditional joining him. It was time. My escort, a senior Alistair councilman, offered his arm. I placed my trembling fingers upon it, the silk of his sleeve cool beneath my touch. And we began the long walk down the aisle. Every eye was on me. The whispers died down. The air grew heavy with expectation. And then I saw him, waiting at the altar. Liam Alistair. Tall, blonde, impeccably dressed. The perfect picture of a desirable alpha heir. He smiled, a polite, practiced curve of the lips that didn't quite reach his eyes. They were blue, clear, and empty. Looking back, seeing him standing there bathed in the sanctified light of the joining platform, how could I mistake polite emptiness for a future? How could I not have seen the hollowness behind the carefully constructed perfection? He looked like a beautiful statue, waiting to receive his due. My steps faltered slightly. The councilman's grip tightened subtly on my arm, urging me forward. Duty. Stability. Peace. The words felt increasingly flimsy, dissolving against the stark reality of Liam's vacant gaze. What fire could ever burn in such placid depths? We reached the altar. The councilman released my arm, placing my hand in Liam's. His skin was cool, smooth. No spark. No jolt. Just contact. The officiant, an ancient alpha whose voice rasped like dry leaves, began the ritual pronouncements, speaking of unity, treaties, and prosperity. His words blurred, fading into a meaningless drone. My gaze drifted past Liam's shoulder, towards the towering oak doors at the far end of the hall, carved with symbols of peace and cooperation between the Alistair and Crestwood packs. My pack. Symbols that suddenly felt like lies etched in wood. And then it happened. Bang! The great oak doors didn't just open. They exploded inwards, ripped from their hinges as if struck by lightning, slamming against the stone walls with a crack that echoed like thunder. Silence crashed down, absolute and terrified. Gasps rippled through the congregation. Guards scrambled, reaching for weapons hidden beneath formal attire. Framed in the splintered doorway stood a figure that sucked the air from the hall. He wasn't just tall, he was immense, broad-shouldered, radiating a raw, untamed power that felt like a physical blow. Wilderness clung to him, the scent of pine, damp earth, and something else, something fiercely masculine and predatory that slammed into my senses, bypassing thought entirely. Rough leather and worn furs covered him, stark contrast to the silks and velvets surrounding us. His dark hair was shaggy, untamed, framing a face carved from granite and fury. But it was his eyes that stopped my heart, molten gold, burning with an intensity that scorched, that saw everything, that stripped away the lace, the lies, the carefully constructed facade of my life. And they weren't scanning the room, assessing the threat, or acknowledging the chaos. They were locked, utterly and terrifyingly, on me. He took a step forward, then another, moving with a fluid, predatory grace that spoke of coiled strength barely restrained. The Alistair guards who rushed him were dispatched with brutal, terrifying efficiency, not killed, but thrown aside like inconvenient obstacles, their movements suddenly clumsy, inadequate against his feral speed. He didn't even seem to look at them. His focus remained absolute. Fixed. Mine. Chaos erupted. Shouts, screams, the scrape of chairs, the metallic slither of drawn blades. Liam stiffened beside me, his hand tightening on mine, a flicker of calculation, not courage, in his eyes. My family looked horrified, outraged. Aunt Alara's face was a mask of disbelief. The figure, the man, the beast, continued his relentless advance, ignoring the cacophony, ignoring the weapons aimed his way. He moved as if wading through shallow water, the resistance meaningless. The golden eyes burned into me, stripping me bare, claiming me in front of everyone. A low growl rumbled in his chest, a sound so primal it vibrated through the stone floor, resonating deep within my bones, awakening something dormant and terrified I never knew existed. He was halfway down the aisle now, a force of nature tearing through the meticulously arranged ceremony. And as he drew closer, his feral gaze pinning me in place, a single, impossible, terrifying truth slammed into my mind, colder and sharper than any fear. I recognized those eyes. Time fractured. The feral stranger, the beast with the impossible golden eyes I somehow knew, stood before me, radiating heat and fury like a forge. The scent rolling off him, pine, earth, storm-charged air, and pure, undiluted male alpha, was overwhelming, clogging my senses, short-circuiting thought. He was close enough now that I could see the harsh lines of his face, the way muscle corded in his neck, the faint, old scar bisecting one dark eyebrow. Close enough that the raw power humming off him felt like a physical vibration against my skin. Liam's grip tightened painfully on my hand. "Get back," he snarled, trying to pull me behind him, his voice thin with a mixture of outrage and fear. "Guards, seize him." The golden eyes didn't even flicker towards Liam. They stayed locked on me, burning with a possessive fire that seemed to consume the very air between us. Then he spoke, his voice a low, rough growl that scraped against my nerves, yet resonated somewhere deeper, somewhere hidden and shamefully responsive. "Mine." One word. A claim staked. A world detonated. It wasn't a request, wasn't a plea. It was a statement of absolute, undeniable fact, ripping through the delicate fabric of the ceremony, through the lifetime of lies I hadn't even known I was living. He reached for me. Liam jerked me back, planting himself between us, adopting a posture of alpha defiance that looked fragile, almost pathetic, against the sheer primal force confronting him. "She is my mate. This is our joining." A sound ripped from the stranger's chest, halfway between a snarl and a bitter laugh. His hand shot out, faster than thought, clamping around Liam's wrist. Liam cried out, his face contorting as the stranger's grip effortlessly crushed his hold on me. Bones ground together with a sickening crunch. My hand was free, tingling where Liam's desperate grip had been moments before. "She was never yours," the beast growled, shoving Liam aside with contemptuous ease. Liam stumbled back, clutching his wrist, his face pale with shock and pain, his calculated composure finally shattering. The golden gaze snapped back to me, pinning me like a terrified rabbit. Before I could react, process, even scream, strong arms, banded with muscle beneath rough leather, scooped me off my feet. One arm clamped around my waist like steel, the other beneath my knees, lifting me effortlessly against a chest that felt as solid as ancient rock. I gasped, struggling instinctively, my fists beating uselessly against the unyielding wall of him. The world tilted, scents and sounds blurring, lilies and blood, shouts and growls, the heavy thud of his heart against my ear. He turned, ignoring the drawn weapons, the screaming threats from my family, the panicked surge of the crowd. "She is Direfang," he roared, the sound echoing off the vaulted ceilings, silencing the chaos for one stunned second. "Marked and stolen. I reclaim what is mine." And then we were moving. Not running, but flowing through the chaos with impossible speed and grace. He moved like the apex predator he so clearly was, weaving through the paralyzed guests and ineffective guards, batting aside anyone who dared impede his path. Threats followed us like angry hornets. "Stop him. Don't let him escape. Protect the Lunar-to-be." Lunar-to-be. The title felt absurd, alien, clinging to me like the expensive, torn lace of my ruined wedding dress. I twisted, trying to see Liam, my family, anything familiar in the blur, but my captor's hold was absolute. All I saw was the splintered doorway rushing towards us, the path to a life I thought I knew vanishing behind me. We burst out of the hall, not through the main entrance, but through a side passage he seemed to know instinctively, plunging into the manicured gardens bordering the estate. Sunlight hit my face, blinding after the hall's relative dimness. The sounds of pursuit were close, frantic. He didn't slow, crashing through ornamental hedges, his long strides eating up the ground. I squeezed my eyes shut, overwhelmed, burying my face against his chest, inhaling that wild, terrifying, somehow grounding scent against my will. Then, the manicured gardens gave way to untamed woods. The transition was abrupt. One moment, clipped lawns and decorative fountains. The next, tangled undergrowth, towering ancient trees, and the loamy smell of true wilderness. The air grew cooler, damper. He vaulted over fallen logs, splashed through shallow streams, his movements sure-footed, economical, driven by pure, focused intent. My initial paralysis began to fade, replaced by frantic terror and a surge of adrenaline. "Let me go," I finally choked out, resuming my struggles, kicking my legs, pushing against his chest. "Where are you taking me? Who are you?" He barely seemed to notice my resistance, adjusting his grip slightly, making it impossible for me to gain purchase. "Quiet," he grunted, the command sharp, impatient. His focus was entirely on our flight, his head constantly scanning our surroundings, ears seemingly attuned to sounds I couldn't hear. The terrain grew steeper, wilder. Rocks replaced soft earth underfoot. The trees were thicker here, ancient pines and gnarled oaks clawing at a sky barely visible through the dense canopy. This was Direfang territory, or close to it. The Forbidden Lands. The place of childhood nightmares and cautionary tales. Panic clawed its way up my throat, cold and sharp. "Please," I tried again, desperation making my voice shake. "Take me back. There's been a mistake. You don't understand." "I understand everything," he cut me off, his voice flat, final. We moved in a disorienting blur of green and brown, the sounds of pursuit growing fainter, though I could still sense the simmering threat behind us. My expensive gown was catching on branches, tearing, a ridiculous liability in the savage flight. My meticulously styled hair tumbled loose, strands whipping across my face. Hours seemed to pass, measured only by the relentless rhythm of his strides and the frantic beating of my own heart. Then, disaster nearly struck. We were navigating a narrow, treacherous ridge path, loose shale skittering under his boots. My weight, perhaps, unbalanced him for a fraction of a second. His foot slipped. The world dropped away beneath us as we lurched sideways. A strangled scream tore from my throat as I saw the ravine yawning below, a dizzying drop onto jagged rocks. In that split second of pure, unadulterated terror, expecting the fall, the impact, the end, something shifted. His arm around my waist clamped down with bruising, impossible strength, anchoring me to him. Simultaneously, his other hand shot out, catching hold of a thick, exposed tree root snaking from the cliff face. Muscles in his back and shoulders bunched, straining with the effort of arresting our fall, holding both our weights against gravity's pull. He hung there for a moment, breathing hard, his knuckles white where he gripped the root. Then, with a low, guttural growl that wasn't directed at me, but at the ravine, at the danger itself, he hauled us back onto the path. He set me on my feet, but kept one hand clamped firmly on my upper arm, his body shielding me from the precipice. My legs were shaking violently, reactions setting in. I stared at him, wide-eyed, breathing in ragged gasps. He hadn't saved me gently. His grip was fierce, almost painful. But he had saved me. His immediate, instinctive reaction had been utter, possessive protection. Not of himself, but of me. The growl hadn't been anger at my weight or the slip. It had been primal fury directed at the threat to his possession? His mate? A confusing spark flickered deep within the terror. A primal sense of safety, illogical and terrifying, warring with the reality of my abduction. He was my captor, a terrifying beast who had ripped me from my life. Yet, in that moment of near death, his overriding instinct had been to protect me with savage certainty. He didn't speak, just pulled me forward, away from the edge, his grip unrelenting. The frantic escape resumed, but something had changed within me. The terror was still there, sharp and consuming, but now it was threaded with a bewildering strand of something else. Awareness? A reluctant acknowledgement of the raw power focused entirely on keeping me with him, keeping me safe, even as he dragged me deeper into his wilderness. Finally, as dusk began to purple the sky, casting long, eerie shadows through the trees. The terrain changed again. We emerged from the dense forest onto a high, windswept plateau. And there, built into the mountainside, loomed the entrance to his stronghold. It wasn't a castle or an estate. It looked more like a natural cave system fortified with rough-hewn timber and dark, ancient stone, blending almost seamlessly into the rugged landscape. Intimidating. Stark. Wild. Smoke curled from a chimney somewhere high above, the only sign of deliberate habitation. Guards, clad in similar rough leathers and furs as my captor, materialized from the shadows, their faces hard, their eyes watchful, nodding respectfully as he approached. Direfang wolves. He didn't pause, striding through the main entrance, a dark, echoing archway, into a vast cavern lit by flickering torches that cast dancing shadows on the stone walls. The air inside was cool, smelling of wood smoke, earth, and the faint, musky scent of pack. It was primitive, rugged, yet strangely solid. Enduring. He finally stopped before a heavy wooden door set deep into the cavern wall. He shifted his grip, turning me to face him. His golden eyes scanned my face, intense, unreadable. Then, he opened the door and essentially deposited me inside. The room was small, austere, windowless, carved from the rock itself. But it was clean. Thick, warm furs covered a simple cot. A pitcher of water and a basin sat on a rough wooden table. It was a cell, undoubtedly, but someone had prepared it. He stood in the doorway, blocking the only exit, his massive frame filling the space. His gaze swept over me, taking in my torn dress, my wild hair, the fear likely etched onto my face. His voice was low, rough, leaving no room for argument. They lied. His eyes blazed, pinning me with their certainty. They stole you. You belong here. Before I could form a reply, summon defiance, or even fully process the words, he pulled the heavy door shut. The sound of a thick wooden bolt sliding into place echoed in the sudden, suffocating silence. Click. Thud. Trapped. I stumbled back until my legs hit the cot, sinking onto the furs, trembling uncontrollably. Alone in the dark heart of the Direfang stronghold, prisoner of the Alpha Beast who claimed I was his stolen mate. The terror was a physical weight, crushing me. But beneath it, that confusing, treacherous spark from the ravine encounter flickered stubbornly. Was this rough-hewn room a prison? Or had the opulent bridal suite, the polished life I'd mourned, been the real trap all along? The question hung in the torchlit silence, terrifying and impossible to ignore. The heavy thud of the bolt sliding home echoed in the sudden, crushing silence. It was the sound of finality, the sound of a caged door slamming shut. Panic, cold and sharp, seized me. I scrambled off the cot, lunging for the door, yanking uselessly at the rough-hewn wood. It didn't budge. Solid, immovable. I pounded on it, my fists connecting with jarring force, shouting his name, or rather, the name that felt like a brand seared onto my consciousness since he'd first appeared. Let me out. Where am I? What do you want? My voice cracked, swallowed by the stone walls. No answer. Only the faint, distant flicker of torchlight under the door's edge and the muffled sounds of the stronghold beyond. Footsteps, the low murmur of voices, the occasional growl that was definitely not human. I pressed my ear against the wood, straining to hear, to understand, but there was nothing discernible, nothing helpful. Just the chilling confirmation that I was deep inside the beast's den. Defeated, I slid down the door, my torn wedding dress pooling around me like a shroud. The stone floor was cold beneath my palms. I drew my knees to my chest, wrapping my arms around them, trying to make myself small, trying to hold onto the fraying edges of my sanity. How had this happened? Hours ago, I stood at an altar, the picture of pack alliance and bridal perfection. Now, Now I was a prisoner, stolen, claimed by a feral alpha who looked at me with eyes like burning gold. Eyes I knew. That fragmented memory, the flash of pain, the scent of pine, those same eyes, pulsed beneath the surface of my fear. Days bled into a timeless stretch of captivity, marked only by the subtle shifts in the torchlight outside my door and the deliveries left just inside. At first, I waged a silent war. I refused the food, smoked meat, coarse bread, dried fruit, pushing the wooden platters away, letting them sit untouched. I refused the water until thirst became an agony I couldn't ignore. I sat rigidly on the cot, facing the wall, refusing to acknowledge the silent presence that sometimes lingered outside the door, his powerful aura a palpable weight against the wood. I would show him. I would not break. I was Maya Crestwood, betrothed of Liam Alistair, not some possession. But my captor, Jax, the name felt torn from my own throat when I'd shouted it, didn't react as I expected. There were no threats, no punishments, no attempts to force my compliance. He simply watched. Sometimes I'd feel his gaze through the thick wood, a prickling awareness on the back of my neck. The old food would be removed, replaced with fresh provisions. More warm, surprisingly soft pelts appeared on the cot one morning. He offered no explanations, no justifications beyond his initial, stark claim. They lied. They stole you. You belong here. His communication, when it rarely occurred through the door, was gruff, minimal, purely functional. Eat. Water. Stay. Each word landed like a stone, devoid of inflection, yet carrying the undeniable weight of command. His relentless, silent provision was more unnerving than rage would have been. It suggested a patience, a certainty, that chipped away at my defiance far more effectively than force. Hunger gnawed, thirst weakened me, and the primitive part of my brain recognized the offering of food and shelter, confusing my conscious rejection. One endless afternoon, frustration boiled over. He'd left a fresh pitcher of water. Seeing it sit there, a symbol of his control, of my dependence, I snapped. With a choked cry of rage, I seized the heavy ceramic pitcher and hurled it at the door with all my strength. It never hit the wood. The door swung inward silently, instantly, and a large hand shot out, snatching the pitcher from the air an inch before impact. Jack stood there, filling the doorway, the captured pitcher held effortlessly in his grip. His golden eyes weren't blazing with anger, but held an intense, unreadable stillness that was somehow worse. He looked from the pitcher, dangling from his fingers, to my heaving chest, my face flushed with futile rage. He said nothing, just held my gaze for a long, charged moment before calmly placing the pitcher back on the table. Then he retreated, pulling the door shut, the bolt sliding home once more. Did I truly think defiance alone would work against a force like him? The realization left me trembling, not with fear this time, but with a draining sense of impotence. He was stronger, faster, seemingly unfazed by my struggles. I needed another way. The opportunity, or what I perceived as one, came a few days later. A different Direfang wolf, younger, less imposing than Jax, brought my morning meal. Perhaps he was less vigilant? When he turned to leave, I moved, darting past him into the torchlit cavern beyond my room. Freedom! The cavern was vast, confusing, a maze of shadows and passages. I ran, fueled by desperation, ignoring the startled shouts behind me. I glimpsed other Direfangs turning, alerted by the commotion, their expressions ranging from surprise to predatory interest. I just needed to reach the entrance, the way we came in. I skidded around a massive stone pillar and ran straight into a wall of solid muscle. Jax. He hadn't chased me. He'd simply appeared, intercepting my path with uncanny speed, moving from the shadows like a phantom. His hands clamped down on my upper arms, his grip like iron bands, halting me instantly. "Enough," he growled, the sound low, vibrating with controlled fury that sent shivers down my spine. It wasn't the hot rage of losing control. It was the cold, lethal anger of absolute authority being challenged. He held me there, letting me feel the sheer impossibility of escape, his golden eyes boring into mine. I could feel the tremors running through his arms, the effort it took him to maintain that restraint. That controlled anger was far more terrifying than any shouting or blows. He hauled me back towards my room, my feet stumbling to keep up, his silence a heavy, suffocating blanket. He didn't throw me inside. He simply placed me firmly back over the threshold before bolting the door again, leaving me shaking with adrenaline and the chilling understanding of just how thoroughly I was trapped. A day or so after my failed escape attempt, Jax himself opened the door. He didn't speak, just jerked his head, indicating I should follow. Wary, but knowing refusal was pointless and defiance had failed, I trailed him through winding cavern passages I hadn't seen before. The air grew warmer, humid, carrying the faint scent of sulfur and damp earth. We emerged into another large cavern, this one dominated by a natural pool of steaming water, fed by a small cascade tumbling down the rock face. Lush, bioluminescent mosses clung to the walls, casting a soft, ethereal green glow on the rising steam. It was strangely beautiful, a hidden sanctuary within the rugged fortress. Several furs and clean, simple woven tunics and leggings, Direfang clothing, lay folded on a flat rock near the pool's edge. Jax gestured towards them, then to the pool. "Wash," he commanded, his voice rough. He turned his back, moving to the far side of the cavern, near the entrance passage, affording me a semblance of privacy while still maintaining his guard. My skin prickled with humiliation and vulnerability. To be ordered to bathe like a child, a prisoner. Yet, the days of grime, fierce sweat, and the remnants of my ruined wedding attire clung to me. The steaming water looked impossibly inviting. Hesitantly, I shed the tattered remains of my gown and the restrictive undergarments, feeling horribly exposed even with his back turned. Slipping into the pool was bliss. The heat soaked into my aching muscles, easing the tension that had held me rigid for days. I scrubbed myself clean, trying to ignore his presence, the weight of his awareness. But it was impossible. The cavern amplified every sound, the splash of water, my own breathing. I found myself watching him surreptitiously through the steam. He stood like a statue, vigilant, but in the shifting light, I saw things I hadn't noticed before. The network of pale scars crisscrossing his broad back and shoulders, visible where his leather tunic gaped. Some looked old, silvery lines against tan skin, others were angrier, more recent. Evidence of a hard, violent life. Battles fought, territory defended. Who was this Alpha Beast? As if sensing my gaze, he turned his head slightly. Our eyes met across the steaming water. Not the burning intensity of the ceremony, nor the cold fury of the escape attempt. This was different. A flicker of something unguarded in those golden depths. Weariness? Loneliness? And perhaps he saw something in my eyes too, beyond the fear. A flicker of the curiosity I tried desperately to hide. A jolt, potent and unexpected, arced between us through the humid air. Like touching frayed wires. Frightening. Thrilling. The fated bond, the connection he claimed, hummed beneath the surface, a low thrumming vibration I could no longer entirely deny, even as I feared its implications. My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked away first, unable to hold that intense, searching gaze, unnerved by the sudden, unwelcome pull. I finished washing quickly, scrubbing away the feeling along with the dirt, and retreated to the offered clothes. The simple tunic and leggings felt strange against my skin, rougher than the silks I was used to, yet practical, freeing. When I was dressed, Jax turned fully, his expression shuddered once more. He led me back to my room without a word, the charged silence thick with unspoken tension. A few days later, he came again. This time, he carried something besides my meal tray. He pushed the door open wider than usual and waited. After a moment's hesitation, I stepped out wary. He led me not back towards the bathing pool, but deeper into the stronghold, to a chamber that felt different from the others. Less communal, more private. Animal hides covered the floor. Maps were pinned to one wall, depicting the rugged Direfang territory and the bordering lands, including the Alastair and Crestwood territories. Weapons hung on another wall, axes, knives, a large, practical-looking sword. This felt like his den, his private quarters or study. He stopped before the maps, turning to face me. His expression was grim. "You recognize this border?" he asked, his voice low, pointing to a specific, jagged line separating Direfang land from my family's territory, Crestwood. I nodded numbly, my throat tight. It was near the area where my childhood accident had happened. The place the fleeting memory kept returning to. He watched me, his golden eyes searching my face. "That scar," he said, his gaze dropping to my shoulder, visible above the simple neckline of the tunic. "The one you carry." My hand instinctively went to the spot, a faint, puckered line I'd barely thought about for years. I stammered, the lie automatic, ingrained. "As a child. Near the border." His lips thinned into a hard line. "No, you didn't fall." He stepped closer, invading my space, his intensity a physical force. "You were taken. Marked. Stolen from us, from me, right here." His fingers stabbed at a point on the map perilously close to the Direfang side of the border. "The Alastairs orchestrated it. They feared your bloodline." My mind reeled. Bloodline? What was he talking about? I was Crestwood, respectable, solid, nothing remarkable in my lineage that I knew of. That's insane," I whispered, shaking my head, trying to deny the sudden, horrifying resonance of his words. "The accident." My mother's dismissiveness. The strange flashes of memory. The Alastairs' almost obsessive push for this alliance, this marriage. "They knew what you could become," Jax continued relentlessly, his voice dropping lower, rougher. "A power they couldn't control, tied to Direfang. They took you to suppress it, to keep you weak, docile." He paused, letting the words sink in, his golden eyes burning into mine. "And they planned to use you, their controlled prize, to manipulate their way into my territory after binding you to their insipid air." His voice was raw conviction, absolute certainty. And looking into those fierce, unwavering eyes, a terrible seed of doubt, cold and poisonous, took root in the foundation of everything I thought I knew. Liam's empty gaze. My family's pressure. Aunt Alara's controlling remarks. My own suppressed restlessness. Was it possible? Could my entire life have been a carefully constructed lie, orchestrated by the very people I was supposed to trust, to marry? The beast who claimed me stood before me, offering a truth far more terrifying than the prison he kept me in. And the most horrifying part? Some deep, hidden instinct whispered that he might be right. They planned to use you, to manipulate their way into my territory. Jax's words hung in the air of his rugged study, heavy as gravestones. Insane. It had to be insane. My entire life, meticulously planned, respectable, safe, a lie? My family, Liam, the Alastairs, conspirators in my lifelong captivity, a gilded cage I hadn't even recognized? My mind scrambled, trying to reject it, to find logical footholds, but the pieces clicked together with horrifying resonance. The strange gaps in my childhood memories. The constant, subtle pressure towards compliance. the chilling emptiness in Liam's eyes, the recurring flashes of golden eyes and forgotten pain. A tremor started in my hands, a strange, unfamiliar heat prickling beneath my skin, radiating outwards from my chest. It wasn't fear, exactly, though terror was certainly present. It was something else, something wild and volatile stirring in response to the shattering of my reality. I clenched my fists, digging my fingernails into my palms, trying to ground myself, to suppress the dizzying disorientation and the unnerving energy thrumming just beneath the surface. Jax watched me, his expression unreadable but intense, as if he could see the internal chaos, the nascent something waking up inside me. He didn't press, didn't demand I believe him instantly. He simply let his accusation hang there, a seed planted in the ruins of my carefully constructed world. After a long moment, he gestured curtly for me to follow, leading me back to my room, the silence between us thick with unspoken turmoil. He left me there, bolting the door, but the echo of his words remained, rattling the bars of the mental cage I hadn't known I was in. Life in the stronghold took on a new, terrifying dimension. Before, I was simply a prisoner fighting against her captor. Now, I was something else. Something unknown, potentially powerful, and utterly lost. The Direfangs I occasionally glimpsed, guards patrolling the caverns, wolves bringing in supplies, still watched me with curiosity, sometimes suspicion, but now I felt their gazes differently. Did they know? Did they see the supposed bloodline Jax spoke of? I avoided eye contact, retreating further into myself, terrified of what they might see, terrified of the simmering energy I now felt constantly buzzing just beneath my skin. Jax seemed to sense the shift, the internal struggle. A few days after the revelation in his study, he appeared at my door, not with food, but with a silent command to follow. He led me, flanked by 2 grim-faced guards this time, towards the main entrance cavern and then, surprisingly, outside. Not towards escape, the guards made that clear, but onto a wide, windswept ledge partway up the mountainside, overlooking a dizzying panorama of jagged peaks and deep, forested valleys. The air was thin, cold, biting against my skin, but it tasted wonderfully clean after the confines of the caves. He gestured for the guards to keep their distance, though their watchful eyes never left me. He stood near the cliff edge, staring out at his domain, seemingly lost in thought, leaving me relatively alone for the first time since my arrival. Alone, yet still utterly captive. I paced the ledge nervously, chafing under the guard's scrutiny, the alien energy still thrumming beneath my skin, agitated by the open space, the wild wind. That's when it happened. A shadow fell over me, vast and sudden. I looked up, startled, as a huge mountain eagle, easily with a wingspan wider than I was tall, swooped low over the ledge, its piercing shriek echoing off the rock face. It wasn't attacking, likely just curious or defending its airspace, but its sudden appearance, the sheer size and wildness of it so close, triggered something primal within me. An involuntary gasp ripped from my throat, not just of surprise, but of overwhelming sensory input. Suddenly, the wind wasn't just cold. It carried 1,000 scents, pine resin, distant snowmelt, the metallic tang of the eagle's feathers, the individual musk of the 2 guards 50 feet away, Jax's own potent scent sharp and distinct near the edge. My hearing exploded. I could hear the eagle's wings beating the air, the tiny skitter of loose pebbles miles down the slope, the blood rushing in my own ears like a tidal wave. It was too much. Painful. Disorienting. Panic surged, hot and blinding. I stumbled back, covering my ears, squeezing my eyes shut against the sensory assault. A low growl vibrated in my own chest, a sound I didn't recognize, raw and animalistic. My hands flew up defensively and I felt something strange. A pulling sensation in my fingers, a stiffness, a sharp pressure against my skin. I risked a glance down. Oh, gods! Extending from my trembling fingertips, just slightly, were points. Dark, curved, unmistakably sharp. Claws. My claws. A strangled cry escaped me. I yanked my hands back, shoving them behind my back, horrified, willing the abominations to retract, to disappear. No. This couldn't be happening. It wasn't real. I was losing my mind. Maya, Jax's voice, low and dangerously close. I hadn't heard him approach over the roaring in my ears. I flinched violently, scrambling backwards until my back hit the cold rock face of the mountain. I refused to look at him, terrified of what he'd see, terrified of the confirmation in his eyes. He stopped a few feet away. The overwhelming sensory input began to recede slightly, leaving me shaky and nauseated. The eagle circled once more, then soared away into the vastness. Silence descended, broken only by the whistling wind and my ragged breathing. You feel it too, don't you? His voice was soft, almost gentle, but held an undercurrent of fierce, possessive confirmation that sent a fresh wave of fear through me. The wildness they tried to bury. I shook my head mutely, pressing myself harder against the rock, willing it to swallow me whole. He took another slow step closer. I could feel the heat radiating from him. Then, gently but firmly, he took one of my hands, the one I'd instinctively kept clenched behind my back. I tried to resist, but his strength was effortless. He slowly uncurled my fingers, exposing the still partially extended claws. I couldn't bear to look, squeezing my eyes shut again. He didn't express disgust or shock. Instead, his thumb brushed over the dark curve of one claw tip. A jolt, like lightning, shot up my arm, a shockwave that resonated deep in my core, making me gasp. It wasn't entirely unpleasant. It felt like recognition, like connection. It's part of you, he murmured, his voice rough. Part of us. Nothing to fear. But I was afraid. Terrified of this power, this change. Terrified of what it meant, of the truth behind Jax's claims, of the beast lurking not just outside my door, but potentially within my own skin. He released my hand, and I quickly hit it again as the claws slowly, reluctantly, retracted, leaving my fingers tingling and aching. He simply watched me, his golden eyes filled with an unnerving mix of understanding and something that looked terrifyingly like pride. Seeing my distress, my undeniable manifestation, seemed to solidify Jax's resolve. Later that day, he led me again, deeper into the stronghold than before, to a part of the cave system protected by heavy, iron-bound doors and stern-faced guards who looked older, more seasoned than the others. Inside, the air was cool and dry, smelling of aged parchment and dust. This was the Direfang archive. Torches illuminated walls covered in ancient carvings, depicting scenes of hunts, battles, and powerful wolf shifters, figures larger, wilder than any I'd seen depicted in Crestwood or Alistair histories. Stone shelves held rows of bound scrolls, clay tablets, and strange, carved artifacts. It felt sacred, ancient, steeped in power and history. His history, and potentially mine. He led me to a specific section where intricate family lines were carved directly into the stone wall, stretching back generations. He pointed to a prominent lineage, tracing a line down through powerful alphas and lunas, their names resonating with primal strength. Then, his finger stopped at a branching point generations ago, connecting the Direfang line to Crestwood? No, not Crestwood directly, but to an older, wilder branch, a name I barely recognized from obscure historical texts, a line rumored to have died out or been absorbed, deliberately forgotten. A line known for unique, untamed shifter abilities. My mother's line, traced back, suppressed, hidden, married into the safer Crestwood lineage. My head spun. It couldn't be. But the carvings were ancient, undeniable. Then, Jax picked up a small, intricately carved wooden box from a nearby shelf. He handled it with reverence. Inside, nestled on faded velvet, lay a pendant. It was crafted from dark, polished wood and what looked like smooth river stones, bound together with aged leather. A powerful, primal energy emanated from it, raising the hairs on my arms. Carved into the central stone was the snarling wolf head symbol of the Direfang pack, but intertwined with another symbol, a crescent moon cradling a single, sharp star. A symbol I'd seen before, in a recurring dream I'd always dismissed, and, faintly, almost invisibly, marked on my own skin just below my collarbone, a birthmark I'd always hidden. "The Luna's mark," Jax said, his voice hushed. "Passed down. It resonates only with the true mate, the one carrying the ancient blood." He held the box out to me. "Touch it." My hand trembled as I reached out. The moment my fingertips brushed the cool stone of the pendant, it happened. Not a shockwave this time, but a flood. Images, feelings, sensations poured into me, overwhelming but clear. A flash of a woman with fiery hair and eyes like forest pools, standing beside a previous Direfang Alpha, the same pendant glowing faintly around her neck. A sense of fierce love, wild loyalty, protective power. Then another flash, darkness, fear, small hands grabbing me, a sharp sting on my shoulder, the scent of Alistair wolves, a sense of loss so profound it stole my breath. My own stolen past, confirming Jax's words. I staggered back, gasping, leaning against the cold stone wall for support. The world tilted, the foundations crumbling completely. It was true. All of it. The betrayal wasn't just political. It was a theft of my identity, my power, my destiny. Liam, my family, the Alistairs, they hadn't just lied. They had mutilated my past and tried to erase my future. Tears streamed down my face, tears of grief, rage, and shattering disillusionment. Looking back, Liam's carefully curated words, my family's insistence on this alliance, the accidents, it all snaps into horrifying focus. Jax watched me, his expression softening slightly, a flicker of shared pain in his eyes. He understood loss. He understood betrayal. Just as I began to grapple with the enormity of this revelation, the heavy archive doors burst open. 2 Direfang scouts stumbled in, breathless, their faces grim, their eyes finding Jax immediately. Alpha, the lead scout, gasped, forgoing protocol in his urgency. Patrols. Alistairs. 3 groups, moving along the eastern border ridge. Heavily armed. Jax stiffened, the brief softness vanishing, replaced instantly by the hard focus of the Alpha leader. The air crackled with his authority. Numbers? Intent. Dozens, the second scout reported. Asking questions. Showing likenesses of her. He nodded towards me, his gaze quick and uneasy. They demand passage, claim they're searching for the kidnapped bride. They mention Liam Alistair by name. He leads the largest group. Liam. Here. Hunting me. The threat wasn't abstract anymore. My past, my would-be captor, was literally marching towards these borders to reclaim his prize, likely intending to silence me and the power he now surely knew I possessed. Jax's protective instincts surged, a low growl rumbling in his chest as he turned, issuing rapid-fire commands to the scouts, his mind already mapping defenses, anticipating attack. The stronghold, already alert, would now shift to a war footing. I watched him, the efficient, dangerous Alpha, protecting his territory, his pack, his mate. The man who had stolen me from one cage only to place me in another. But now, the question haunting me shifted, twisting into something sharper, more complex. If he was right, if this bond, this awakening power, was my true heritage, was his possessive protection truly a cage? Or, facing the cold ambition of Liam Alistair and the pack who betrayed me, was this beast's fortress the only real sanctuary I had left? Was this fated bond protection, or was I just a more valuable prize in his cage, the key to a war he was always destined to fight? The answer remained terrifyingly unclear. The air in the Direfang stronghold crackled with imminent violence. Every shadow seemed deeper, every sound sharper. The Direfangs moved with quiet, deadly purpose, checking weapons, reinforcing entrances, their usual gruffness replaced by a focused intensity. Scouts slipped in and out like ghosts, bringing updates from the borders. Liam was massing his forces. Hunting me. The knowledge sat cold and heavy in my gut. The confirmation of my stolen past, the burgeoning power humming beneath my skin, it all felt terrifyingly real now, inextricably linked to the approaching storm. There was no going back. No escape from the truth or the consequences. Fear was a constant companion, but beneath it, something else stirred, a fragile, unfamiliar flicker of resolve. This wasn't just Jax's fight anymore. It was mine too. They hadn't just stolen his mate, they had stolen my life. Jax must have sensed this shift, or perhaps practicality simply dictated his next move. If I was truly the Luna of the ancient bloodline, and if the Alistairs were coming for me, I couldn't remain helpless. I couldn't be a liability. I needed control. He found me pacing restlessly in my stone room, the phantom sensation of claws tingling in my fingertips. "Come," he ordered, his voice clipped, businesslike, though his eyes held that familiar, unnerving intensity. "There is work to do." He led me not to the archives or his study, but to a secluded cavern deep within the mountain, far from the main thoroughfares. It was large, dusty, and empty, save for training markers scrawled on the floor in chalk. "Here," he stated simply, "we begin." And so began the strangest, most intense days of my life. Jax, the Alpha Beast, my captor, became my reluctant teacher. He started with the basics, controlling the sensory overload that had crippled me on the ledge. Hours were spent with me blindfolded, learning to filter sounds, to identify individual scents, to push back the overwhelming tide of input. It was exhausting, frustrating work. Then came the shifting. He couldn't force the change, but he guided me, pushed me, showed me how to tap into that wellspring of wild energy, how to allow the wolf within to surface, even partially. The first time I managed to consciously extend just the claws on one hand, sharp and dark, felt like a victory hard won, even as a tremor of fear ran through me. Then came movement. Balance. Basic defense. Jax was a demanding instructor, patient in his own gruff way, but unforgiving of lapses in focus. He moved with a fluid deadliness that was terrifying and captivating. Sparring with him was like dancing with lightning. He'd demonstrate a block, a parry, forcing me to react, to anticipate. This required proximity. Intense, unnerving proximity. Correcting my stance meant his hands on my waist, his body close behind mine, his breath warm against my ear. Demonstrating a disarming technique meant tangled limbs, the shocking contact of skin on skin, the jolt of awareness that short-circuited my thoughts. The air between us thickened daily, charged with an unresolved tension that had nothing to do with the impending battle. We rarely spoke of personal matters, yet vulnerability slipped through the cracks. He'd murmur about controlling the rage that fueled the shift, a hint of his own lifelong struggle. I'd see the weariness in his eyes after a long night planning defenses, the burden of leadership etched onto his face. In those moments, the fearsome Alpha Beast seemed achingly human, solitary, scarred. One afternoon, during a particularly intense sparring session, I misjudged a block. Instead of deflecting his arm, I stumbled forward, right into his chest. His arms came around me instinctively to steady me, mine flew up to brace against his shoulders. We froze, inches apart, my face tilted up towards his golden eyes blazing down at me, the scent of him, pine, earth, power, filling my senses. The world narrowed to the space between us, the air vibrating with need, with the undeniable pull of the bond. His gaze dropped to my lips. I saw his control fray, his jaw tighten, the predatory instinct warring with something else, something deeper. My breath hitched. My heart hammered against his chest. Time stopped. He leaned down, slowly, inevitably. Closer. Closer. Then, with a low growl that was equal parts frustration and desire, he abruptly pulled back, setting me firmly away from him. The rejection, even though my mind screamed it was for the best, stung. Focus, Maya, he rasped, his voice rougher than usual, turning away to pace the training floor. But his eyes, when they flickered back to me, betrayed a different command entirely, a hunger that mirrored the terrifying flicker of response deep within me. We didn't spar again that day. The fragile truce, the growing intensity of our connection, was shattered a day later. The final, devastating piece of the puzzle fell into place, not through a clumsy discovery, but delivered by Jax himself, his face grim, his eyes filled with a cold, hard light. He came to my room, holding a slim, oilskin-wrapped packet. Intercepted correspondence, taken from an Alistair scout captured near the border days ago. He laid them out on the small wooden table. Letters. Several in Liam's precise, elegant script, addressed to his father. Cold. Calculating. Discussing the asset, me, the necessity of retrieving me before my latent abilities manifested further, confirming the plan to pacify me once secured. Ensuring my complete compliance and the eventual absorption of Direfang resources through our union. He expressed annoyance at my unexpected spirit, lamented the inconvenience of Jax's interference. There was no affection, no concern. Only strategy, possession, control. Reading his words felt like swallowing shards of ice. But the worst was yet to come. Beneath Liam's letters lay another, folded separately. The handwriting was different. Familiar. Excruciatingly familiar. It was from my Aunt Alara, addressed to Liam's mother, the Alistair Luna. Dated months ago, discussing the final wedding arrangements. Full of polite assurances and political maneuvering, but then, a chilling paragraph. Rest assured, her flights of fancy have been thoroughly curtailed over the years. The Crestwood conditioning holds firm. She understands duty above all else. The dormant strains you inquired about remain precisely that, dormant. She will be a perfectly manageable, compliant vessel for the Alliance's future. A vessel. Dormant strains. Conditioning. My own family, not just aware, but actively complicit. Involved in the suppression, the lies, the deliberate molding of me into a manageable prize. The lavender scent I associated with my aunt suddenly smelled like poison. The foundation of my world didn't just crack, it disintegrated into dust. What would you have done, knowing your entire life, your sense of self, was deliberately constructed by your captors, including those you loved? The pain was a physical blow, stealing my breath, leaving me hollowed out, adrift in a sea of betrayal. I didn't realize I was crying until Jax awkwardly thrust a piece of clean linen into my hand. I looked up at him through blurred vision, clutching the damning letters. The Alpha Beast. My captor. The only one who had told me the truth. Later that night, the grief and rage coalesced into a desperate need for something more than just the facts. I found Jax in his study, poring over maps under the flickering torchlight, the lines of strain deep around his eyes. He looked up as I entered, his expression wary. I didn't shout. I didn't accuse. My voice, when I spoke, was low, trembling with raw pain. It's true, I whispered, holding up the letters, though he already knew. All of it. He nodded grimly, his gaze searching mine. Why? I asked, the question encompassing everything. Why me? Why go to such lengths? This bond. I struggled for words, the emotional turmoil making thought difficult. Is it just instinct, Jax? A primal drive to reclaim what was marked as yours? Like territory? Or is there more? I took a shaky breath, meeting his intense gaze directly. Do you see me, Maya? Or just the Luna mate, the key to your pack's power, the fulfillment of some ancient prophecy? The question hung between us, heavy with the weight of my shattered past and uncertain future. I needed to know if this connection, the one thing that felt terrifyingly real amidst the lies, was just another form of ownership. He stood slowly, the maps forgotten. He seemed to struggle, his usual gruff certainty replaced by something hesitant, almost raw. The alpha mask, the impenetrable facade, slipped. I saw the loneliness etched around his eyes, the deep-seated trauma of the betrayal he'd suffered long before I was even aware of it. Words. He started, his voice rough, in use to this terrain. He shook his head, frustrated. Words fail. Instinct. It is strong. The bond. It calls. It demands. He took a step closer, his golden eyes filled with a vulnerability that stunned me. When they took you, it was like tearing the heart from my chest, leaving a wound that never healed. Finding you again. He swallowed hard. The thought of losing you again, it is. He couldn't finish the sentence, the emotion too raw. He looked down at his hands, then back at me, his gaze searing. The bond doesn't lie, Maya. It is real. Fierce. Absolute. He paused, his expression etched with a profound, aching honesty. But understanding, partnership, words, that is harder. I know only how to protect, how to claim, how to hold. A flicker of fear crossed his face, the fear of rejection, of being seen only as the beast. Learning, trust, that is new. He didn't offer easy answers or false promises. He admitted his own flaws, his own struggles, acknowledging the primal nature of the bond while revealing the depth of his fear and loneliness beneath the alpha rage. It wasn't a declaration of love, not in the way stories told it. But it was truth. Raw, complex, terrifying truth. And it shattered the last of my resistance, not through force, but through a shared, aching vulnerability. The emotional stakes, already sky-high, catapulted into the stratosphere, leaving us standing on the precipice of a battle, both external and internal, with no clear path forward, only the undeniable, dangerous truth of the bond between us. The last echoes of Jax's raw admission, learning, trust, that is new still hung heavy in the air between us, a fragile bridge built across a chasm of fear and primal instinct. His golden eyes held mine, stripped bare of the usual alpha dominance, revealing the lonely wolf beneath. My heart ached with a confusing mix of empathy and terror. Could this impossible bond, born of violence and betrayal, ever become more? Before the thought could fully form, before either of us could break the charged silence, it was shattered. AWOOO. A piercing, urgent howl ripped through the stronghold, the alarm horn. Deep, resonant, carrying undertones of imminent danger. It was immediately followed by frantic shouts from the outer caverns, the unmistakable clash of steel on steel, and guttural roars that were pure, unrestrained shifter fury. Jax reacted instantly. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by the lightning-fast reflexes of the alpha leader. His head snapped up, eyes blazing, already assessing, commanding. "They're here," he growled, the words almost unnecessary. The battle we'd anticipated had begun. He grabbed my arm, not roughly, but with undeniable urgency. "Stay back," he ordered, pulling me towards the relative safety of a shadowed alcove deeper within his study. "Do not leave this room." His eyes locked with mine for a split second, a silent communication passing between us, fear, warning, and something fiercely protective that resonated with the bond thrumming beneath my skin. Then he was gone, melting into the chaos of the main cavern, his own battle cry adding to the terrifying symphony of the siege. Alone in the relative quiet of the study, the sounds of battle seemed amplified. Roars of rage, screams of pain, the sickening crunch of bone, the metallic shriek of blades. It painted a brutal picture in my mind. I could smell it too, drifting from the outer caverns, the coppery tang of blood, the acrid scent of shifter fury, the sharp ozone of fear. My training, rudimentary as it was, kicked in instinctively. My senses heightened, filtering the chaos, identifying the growls of Direfang defenders, the sharper, somehow less grounded snarls of the attackers, Alistairs. Panic warred with a strange, cold determination. Jax was out there, fighting. The Direfangs were fighting, defending their home, defending me, whether I fully belonged or not. And Liam. Liam was leading the assault, coming to reclaim his prize, to drag me back to a life that was nothing but lies and suppression. Time stretched, distorted by adrenaline. How long had I been huddled there? Minutes? An hour? Suddenly, the sounds of fighting erupted closer, just outside the study entrance. A heavy body slammed against the door, followed by a triumphant Alistair snarl, quickly cut short by a savage Direfang roar and a wet, tearing sound. My heart leaped into my throat. Then, the doorway darkened. Liam Alistair stood there, no longer the polished, polite fiancé from the wedding altar. His fine clothes were torn, smeared with dirt and blood, not his own, I suspected. His hair was wild, his breath coming in ragged gasps, but his eyes, they burned with a cold, possessive light that chilled me to the bone. Several armed Alistair guards flanked him, their faces grim. "Maya," he breathed, a predatory smile twisting his lips. "Finally, did you truly think this, beast, could keep you?" He stepped into the study, his gaze sweeping over me, assessing, proprietary. "This place is falling. It's time to come home. Your family is worried. This savage has poisoned your mind." Home. The word tasted like ash. "You mean back to the cage you helped build?" The revelation of Aunt Alara's letter, his own cold words, fueled a surge of righteous fury that momentarily eclipsed my fear. Liam's smile faltered, replaced by impatience. "Don't be foolish. You're overwrought. Confused. He only wants your power, the connection to this territory your bloodline represents. He doesn't care about you. I do. You are meant to be my Luna." He took another step closer, his hand reaching out. "Remember your duty, Maya. Our alliance." "Duty?" I spat the word. "My duty was a lie you fed me my entire life." His eyes narrowed. "Enough of this." He lunged, fast, aiming to grab my arm, to drag me away. "Guards, secure her." Before his fingers could even brush my skin, a blur of dark fur and fury intercepted him. Jack slammed into Liam, sending him reeling back against the wall with bone-jarring force. Jack stood over him for a split second, a low, lethal growl rumbling in his chest, teeth bared, pure alpha predator defending his mate. Then, the Alistair guards surged forward, attacking Jax from all sides. Watching Jax fight was terrifying and awe-inspiring. He moved with brutal efficiency, a whirlwind of claws and fangs and savage strength, meeting the guards' attack head-on. But there were too many of them in the confined space. One caught him across the arm with a blade, drawing blood. Another lunged, aiming for his throat. And something inside me snapped. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was pure, visceral reaction. Seeing Jax bleed, seeing Liam watching with cold calculation, seeing the Alistairs trying to destroy the only person who'd shown me the truth, the fragile connection forged between us ignited like wildfire. The simmering energy I'd struggled to control exploded outwards. It wasn't a full shift into a wolf. It was something different. Something tied to the ancient bloodline Jax had spoken of. A wave of raw force, like concentrated sound or kinetic energy, pulsed from me, slamming into the Alistair guards closest to Jax, sending them flying back as if struck by a physical blow. The air crackled. My ears popped. My vision sharpened, edges becoming unnaturally clear, colors vibrant. Power, terrifying and exhilarating, surged through my veins. I felt alive. Dangerously alive. The remaining guards hesitated, stunned. Liam stared, his eyes wide with shock and, finally, a flicker of fear. He hadn't expected this. He'd expected the compliant vessel. In that moment of hesitation, I moved. Not with practiced skill, but with pure instinct. I launched myself at the guard nearest Jax, the one who had drawn his blood. My claws, sharp and dark, sprang forth effortlessly this time, not partial points, but fully formed, lethal extensions of my will. I raked them across the guard's sword arm, eliciting a howl of pain as he dropped his weapon. A roar tore from my throat, startlingly loud, fiercely resonant, echoing the Direfang battle cries outside. It wasn't a plea or a scream. It was a declaration. An acceptance. A claiming of my own power, my own nature. Direfang. Jax recovered instantly, dispatching another guard while I engaged the one I'd wounded. He didn't seem surprised by my transformation, by the wave of force. Instead, a fierce, almost savage pride flashed in his eyes as he met my gaze across the chaos. Now, and then we fought. Side by side. Back to back. It wasn't planned, wasn't choreographed. It was pure instinct, primal synergy. Where I lacked technique, I had raw power and surprising speed. Where Jax held back slightly to protect me before, he now fought with unrestrained ferocity, trusting me to hold my own. Our movements complemented each other, anticipated each other. He'd block a blow aimed at me, I'd unleash another pulse of energy to stagger an opponent flanking him. We became a whirlwind of claws, teeth, and crackling power, cutting through the remaining guards until only one opponent remained standing amidst the wreckage of the study. Liam Alistair. He looked desperate now, his handsome face contorted with rage and disbelief. He held a dagger, weaving slightly, his eyes darting between me and Jax. "She belongs with me," he screamed, lunging not at Jax, but at me, the perceived weaker link, the prize he still thought he could claim. "She chooses," Jax roared, moving to intercept, but I was already reacting. I met Liam's lunge, not with brute force, but with agility I didn't know I possessed. I sidestepped his clumsy attack, used his momentum against him, and slammed the heel of my hand into his side, just below the ribs. Simultaneously, I channeled that energy again, a focused jolt that made him cry out, staggering back, the dagger clattering from his nerveless fingers. He stared at me, panting, defeated, his eyes filled with shocked betrayal. "Maya." I looked him dead in the eye, the last vestiges of the girl who had stood at the altar burning away in the heat of battle and newfound power. "I was never yours," I said, my voice clear and steady, echoing in the sudden silence. Jax moved forward, radiating lethal intent, clearly intending to finish it. But I put a hand on his arm, stopping him. This ending needed to be mine. My choice. My agency claimed. I didn't kill Liam. Killing him felt unnecessary. He was already broken, his power, his meticulous plans, shattered. Instead, I delivered a sharp, precise blow to the side of his head with the edge of my hand, using the disabling techniques Jax had started teaching me. Liam crumpled to the ground, unconscious but alive. My statement made, my choice sealed not by Jax's kill, but by my own action, my own measured strength. Silence descended, broken only by our harsh breathing and the distant sounds of the siege continuing outside the study, though it seemed to be lessening. We stood together, Jax and I, amidst the debris, covered in grime, sweat, and splattered blood. He looked at me, his golden eyes blazing, not with rage, but with fierce pride, respect, and that same possessive fire, but now it felt different. Earned. Chosen. The question that had haunted me, was this bond strength or just another cage, finally had an answer forged in the heart of the battle. Standing beside Jax, having embraced the wildness within, having fought for my own future, the bond felt like strength. Terrifying, untamed, but undeniably, powerfully, strength. The siege wasn't over, but the heart of the attack, Liam's attempt to reclaim me, was broken. We had won this crucial battle together. Silence descended upon the wrecked study, thick and ringing, broken only by the ragged sound of our breathing and the unconscious groans of Liam Alistair crumpled on the floor. The adrenaline that had surged through me like wildfire began to ebb, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion and a trembling awareness of what had just transpired. I looked down at my hands, no longer pristine, but smudged with grime, blood, some mine, some not, the dark claws now retracted, leaving only a faint tingling ache. I had fought. I had embraced the power within me. I had chosen. Jax stood beside me, his presence a solid, grounding force amidst the chaos. The feral rage had faded from his eyes, replaced by an intense, almost stunned assessment as he looked from the defeated Liam to me. He reached out, his calloused fingers gently brushing a smudge of dirt from my cheek, his touch surprisingly hesitant, charged with unspoken questions. Our eyes met, and in that gaze, a universe of understanding passed between us, acknowledgement of the shared battle, the power unleashed, the choice made. The sounds from outside the study had died down significantly. Heavy footsteps approached, and 2 burly Direfang guards appeared in the doorway, their expressions grim as they took in the scene. They looked to Jax for orders, their eyes flickering towards me with newfound respect, perhaps even awe. Jax tore his gaze from mine, his alpha authority snapping back into place, though subtly tempered. "Take him to the deepest holding cell," he commanded, nodding towards Liam. "Secure him well. See to the other prisoners. Double the watch on the perimeter." The guards nodded sharply, efficiently hauling Liam's unconscious form away like a sack of grain. As they disappeared, Jax turned back to me. The silence stretched, no longer ringing, but heavy with anticipation. The adrenaline was gone now, leaving me feeling shaky, vulnerable, acutely aware of the torn tunic, the stinging cut on my arm from the earlier fight, the sheer magnitude of the shift in my world. He stepped closer, his golden eyes scanning me for injuries. He gently took my arm, inspecting the shallow cut left by the Alistair guard's blade. His touch was careful, almost reverent, vastly different from the possessive grip of my abduction or the demanding contact during training. He guided me to sit on the edge of a sturdy, overturned table, the only piece of furniture relatively intact. He retrieved a water skin and a strip of clean cloth from a pack one of the guards had left, his movements economical, focused. He carefully cleaned the cut, his large hands surprisingly gentle. Neither of us spoke. The quiet intimacy of the gesture, the unspoken care after the shared violence, felt more profound than any words could have been. When he finished tending the cut, He didn't move away immediately. He knelt before me, his gaze locked on mine, searching. The Alpha, the Beast, the Captor, seemed small somehow, stripped down to the essential wolf beneath, waiting. Stay? His voice was rough, barely a whisper, heavy with a vulnerability that constricted my chest. He wasn't commanding. He wasn't claiming. He was asking me to choose freely after everything. Choose to stay, Maya? My breath caught. The choice, not mandated by fate, not forced by capture, but offered. After the lies, the manipulation, the gilded cage of my past, this raw, uncertain, dangerous future was being laid at my feet as a choice. I looked into his golden eyes, seeing the fierce loyalty, the primal possessiveness still there, but now overlaid with hesitant hope, with the dawning understanding of partnership he'd admitted struggling with. I thought of Liam's cold ambition, my family's betrayal, the emptiness of the life I'd almost had. Then I thought of the strength I'd found here, the unwelcome but undeniable pull of the bond, the raw honesty, however difficult, I'd found with this complicated Alpha. Yes, I whispered, the word feeling both terrifying and utterly right. I choose to stay. A shudder ran through him, a release of tension so profound it was almost visible. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, then opened them again, the golden depths blazing with fierce, relieved intensity. He didn't grab me, didn't roar his triumph. He simply reached out, his hand covering mine where it rested on my knee, a gesture of quiet acceptance, of sealing the pact. Later, much later, after the stronghold was fully secured, the wounded tended, the adrenaline completely faded into weary aches, Jax led me to his private quarters. Not the austere room I'd been kept in initially, but the study where he'd first confronted me with the truth, connected to a larger, warmer chamber dominated by a large hearth and thick furs covering a sleeping platform. It was rugged, masculine, undeniably his space. He built up the fire in the hearth, the crackling flames casting dancing shadows on the stone walls, chasing away the chill. We sat near it, sharing smoked meat and water in a silence that was no longer tense, but companionable, exhausted. The need for communication, however, pressed heavily on me. Choosing to stay was one thing, figuring out how was another entirely. Jax, I began hesitantly, tracing patterns on the fur beneath me. I chose to stay. But I meant what I asked before. I can't just be a possession, a role to be filled. This bond. I looked up, meeting his watchful gaze. It's powerful. I feel it, but I need partnership, trust, not just instinct. I laid my fear bare. I'm afraid of losing myself completely to the Luna mate role, of you only seeing the bond, not me. He listened intently, his brow furrowed in concentration, the struggle to translate his primal feelings into words evident on his face. He reached out, tucking a stray strand of hair behind my ear, his touch sending sparks down my spine. Maya, he said, his voice low, serious. Seeing you fight, embracing the power, it was. He searched for the word. Magnificent. But it was you I saw. Your courage. Your fire. He sighed, a rough sound. The bond, it ensures loyalty, protection, desire. It makes you essential. He paused, grappling. But respect, trust, understanding, that is built, not given by fate. He looked directly into my eyes, his own fierce and utterly sincere. I do not know how to be the mate you deserve. My life has been solitary, hard. I know command, not sharing. His vulnerability was startling, disarming. But I will learn. With you. If you will teach me. His honesty, his willingness to admit his own shortcomings, cracked open something deep inside me. He wasn't promising perfection. He was offering effort, partnership, a shared journey. Tears pricked my eyes, not of sorrow this time, but of overwhelming emotion, relief, fear, hope, and a burgeoning feeling that felt terrifyingly like love. I leaned forward, bridging the small distance between us, resting my forehead against his. "Okay," I whispered. "We learn together." The air crackled, the bond humming between us, no longer a source of fear, but a current of shared energy, shared choice. He tilted his head, his lips finding mine, tentative at first, then deepening with a hunger that mirrored my own. This kiss wasn't the near miss in the training room, charged with forbidden UST. This wasn't a claim or an act of possession. It was a conscious sealing of our choice, a collision of primal need and nascent tenderness. We came together then, shedding layers of armor, both literal and emotional. It was fierce, passionate, tangled limbs and sharp intakes of breath against the backdrop of the crackling fire. There was wildness, the echo of the beasts within, nips and possessive touches that spoke of the untamed nature of our bond. But intertwined with it was a surprising tenderness, a reverence in his touch, a shared vulnerability in our gazes. It was a claiming, yes, but a mutual one. An acknowledgement of the fated connection, now irrevocably intertwined with conscious choice, with respect, with the fragile beginnings of love. Afterwards, lying tangled in the furs, his arm possessively around me, a flicker of doubt surfaced. Could this intensity last? Could we truly build a partnership from such violent beginnings? But looking at his face, relaxed in sleep for the first time since I'd met him, feeling the steady beat of his heart against my back, a sense of shared determination settled over me. We would face the difficulties together. The next day brought the necessary council meeting. Held in the main cavern, the atmosphere was somber but resolute. Jack stood before the assembled pack elders and key warriors, not on a raised dais, but among them. And I stood beside him. Not behind, not shielded, but beside him. He recounted the battle briefly, acknowledged the losses, and then turned to the issue of the prisoners, particularly Liam. His gaze swept the room, then landed on me. Maya Crestwood, Lunar of the Direfang, fought beside us, he stated, his voice ringing with pride. She faced the Alpha who sought to claim her and chose her own justice. Her insight into the Alistairs is invaluable. She will speak. A murmur went through the assembly. All eyes turned to me. My heart pounded, but I stood tall. I spoke clearly, outlining what I knew of the Alistairs' ambitions, their political maneuvering, suggesting strategies that focused on exposing their treachery to other packs rather than immediate, bloody retribution, which would only isolate the Direfangs. I spoke of Liam not as a monster to be executed, but as a political prisoner, a bargaining chip. My voice didn't shake. I felt centered, powerful in a way that had nothing to do with claws or pulses of energy. Jax listened intently, nodding almost imperceptibly, letting me command the floor. When I finished, he simply said, "Luna Maya speaks wisely. We will consider this path." His public support, his acknowledgement of me as a partner, not just a mate, resonated through the cavern, cementing the shift in our dynamic for all to see. Later, as dusk settled, we stood together on the high ledge overlooking the vast, wild territory. The wind was cold, but invigorating. The scars of the battle were visible below, damaged sections of the outer defenses, the lingering scent of smoke, but the land itself felt strong, enduring. "It won't be easy," I murmured, looking out at the rugged peaks, thinking of the political fallout, the challenge of integrating my past self with my new reality, the long road of learning to trust and communicate with the complex Alpha beside me. Jax followed my gaze, then looked down at me, a faint smile touching his lips. He took my hand, his grip warm, strong, reassuring. "We didn't get here the easy way," he replied, his voice rough but steady. No, we certainly hadn't. But standing there, hand in hand, the bond humming between us not as a chain, but as a current of shared strength and hard-won choice, I finally believed we could face whatever came next, together. The future was uncertain, wild, dangerous perhaps, but it was ours to forge. The tang of frost hung sharp in the morning air, mingling with the sense of pine and wood smoke as Jax and I stood before the assembled council elders and the two disgruntled hunters. Or rather, Jax stood, radiating quiet authority, while I sat perched comfortably on a smoothed boulder beside him, listening intently. Months had passed since the siege, marked by the turning of seasons across the rugged Direfang peaks. Nearly a full year since my life had been violently upended and irrevocably changed. The northern ridge pact is clear. Talik, one of the hunters, grumbled, his arms crossed stubbornly over his thick fur tunic. That herd migrates through our ancestral hunting grounds. The Stoneclaw pack has no claim. Their scouts report the herd shifted routes weeks ago due to early snowpack, countered Lyra, one of Jax's most trusted advisors, her gaze sharp. Following the herd led them across the agreed border. They took only what they needed. Jax listened, his golden eyes missing nothing, letting them voice their grievances. In the early days, his response might have been a low growl, a curt dismissal based purely on territorial imperative. But now he waited, his presence a silent command for order, allowing the process to unfold. He glanced at me, a subtle invitation. I leaned forward slightly. Talik, I began, my voice calm but clear, carrying easily in the crisp air. Your family's connection to that ridge is deep. We all respect that. But Lyra is right about the snows this year. They came early, unexpectedly harsh. I paused, meeting his gaze directly. The Stoneclaws are not our enemies. Showing aggression over a necessary hunt driven by unforeseen circumstances risks turning a neutral neighbor into a hostile one, right when winter truly sets in. Is one hunt worth a potential border skirmish that could cost Direfang lives when resources are already stretched? My time here, learning the ways of the pack, studying Jax's maps and listening, truly listening, had given me insights beyond just instinct. Talik shifted, his stubborn expression softening slightly. He hadn't considered the broader political implications. Jax spoke then, his voice deep, final. Luna Maya speaks sense. Anger clouds judgment. We honor tradition, but we must also be pragmatic. Lyra, send word to the Stoneclaw Alpha. Acknowledge their hunt, confirm the border remains unchanged despite the herd's shift, perhaps suggest a joint patrol to monitor the snowpack's effect on future migrations. Talik, he fixed the hunter with a stern but fair look. Your frustration is understood, but channel it into preparation for the winter hunt within our established territory. Ensure your kin are ready. Talik grumbled again, but the fight had gone out of him. He nodded curtly, accepting the ruling. The council murmured approval. It was a small issue, resolved quickly, but it highlighted the change. Jax's authority remained absolute, but it was now tempered with thoughtful consideration, and my voice, my perspective, was not just heard, but valued, woven into the fabric of leadership. We were a team, leading together, our strengths complementing each other. Life had found a new rhythm, demanding but fulfilling. We patrolled the borders together, sometimes in comfortable silence, sometimes discussing pack matters, sometimes just enjoying the wild beauty of our territory. Jax taught me more about controlling my shifter abilities, not just the claws or the pulses of energy, but the finer points of sensory control, tracking, even the beginnings of understanding the potential for a full shift, though that remained elusive, perhaps tied to a deeper emotional settling I hadn't yet fully reached. In turn, I helped him navigate the complexities of diplomacy, finding words where his instincts defaulted to action, smoothing ruffled feathers within the pack with a touch he sometimes lacked. We trained the younger shifters, Jax focusing on strength and combat, while I found a surprising connection with those whose abilities, like mine, were less conventional, helping them understand and manage powers that might otherwise frighten them. Liam remained a prisoner, a useful reminder to the Alistairs and other packs of the consequences of treachery. His pack, weakened and discredited after their failed siege and the truths we strategically let slip, had withdrawn, licking their wounds. Peace, fragile but holding, reigned along our borders. Jax himself had changed, or perhaps allowed more of his true self to surface. The fierce possessiveness was still there, a low hum beneath the surface, but it was banked by trust. He still watched me with that unnerving intensity, but now it felt less like assessing a possession and more like truly seeing me. He even tried, in his own gruff way, to communicate more openly, sharing frustrations about pack logistics or rare moments of satisfaction after a successful hunt, small bridges built across the chasm of his ingrained solitude. One evening, as the first stars began to prick the darkening twilight sky, we found ourselves on that same high ledge where my powers had first terrifyingly manifested. The wind whipped strands of my hair across my face, the air biting cold, but the view was spectacular, endless waves of snow-dusted peaks glowing under the rising moon. We sat huddled together for warmth, wrapped in thick furs. I leaned my head against his solid shoulder, thinking back to the terrified girl in the torn wedding dress who had stood here months ago. How could I have known, I murmured, almost to myself, that the life I mourned, the one that seemed so perfect, was just a cage painted gold. The realization no longer brought the sharp agony of betrayal, but a quiet sense of acceptance, of gratitude for the harsh, unwelcome truth. It was all illusion. Jax tightened his arm around me, pulling me closer. He didn't offer platitudes. He rarely did. Instead, he nuzzled his face against my hair, inhaling deeply, a low rumble of contentment in his chest. After a long moment, he spoke, his voice rough against my ear. "Your fire. They tried to smother it. Here," he gestured vaguely at the wild landscape around us. "It burns bright. Fits. It was perhaps the highest compliment he could offer, an acknowledgement that my wildness, the very thing suppressed in my old life, belonged here, with him, in this untamed land. He respected my strength, not just the strange power I wielded, but the resilience that had brought me through the fire. His love wasn't spoken in sonnets or flowery declarations. It was in the unwavering loyalty in his eyes, the fierce protectiveness of his body shielding me from the wind, the quiet understanding that passed between us without words. He tilted my chin up, his golden eyes warm in the moonlight. He didn't kiss me immediately, just held my gaze, a silent reaffirmation of everything we'd overcome, everything we were building. Then, a playful glint entered his eyes. He leaned in, and instead of a kiss, gave a gentle, possessive nip to my jawline, sharp teeth grazing skin, a reminder of the beast beneath, the wildness that called to my own. I laughed, swatting playfully at his shoulder, the sound echoing in the vast quiet. He caught my hand, lacing his fingers through mine, his touch grounding, secure. In that moment, the blend of wild passion and deep, steady security felt like the very definition of us. Later, under the full moon that bathed the territory in ethereal silver light, we stood overlooking the valley from the entrance of the main cavern. The pack slept, the stronghold quiet save for the crackling hearths and the distant howl of a lone wolf greeting the moon. The air hummed with the quiet power of the mountains, the ancient magic of this place. Jax pulled me against his back, wrapping his strong arms around my waist, resting his chin on top of my head. We stood in comfortable silence, simply being, watching the moonlight paint the world in shades of silver and shadow. This wild, rugged land was our home. This fierce, loyal pack was our family. This intense, complicated alpha was my mate, my partner, my love. It hadn't been easy. The scars remained, his from a lifetime of hardship and betrayal, mine from a stolen childhood and shattered illusions. There were still times his alpha possessiveness flared, times my fear of being controlled resurfaced, times communication failed and instinct took over. But we navigated it, together, with patience, honesty, and the unwavering strength of the bond between us, a bond not of chains, but of resonant souls. Looking out at the moonlit wilderness, I thought back to the terrified question that had plagued me in the beginning. Was this bond my destiny or just another cage? The answer felt clear now, settled deep in my bones. It was destiny, a pull stronger than reason, ancient and undeniable. But destiny wasn't a cage unless you allowed it to be. We had faced the lies, the violence, the fear, and we had chosen each other, actively, fiercely. We chose to make it freedom. Jax nuzzled my neck again, a low growl of contentment rumbling against my back. I leaned into his strength, his warmth, feeling utterly safe, utterly cherished, utterly home. Our happily ever after wouldn't be tame or conventional. It would be fierce, passionate, loyal, forged in fire and tempered by trust, wild and enduring as the mountains around us. And it was irrevocably, undeniably ours.